Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with a good friend, coach, mentor, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey Jim, I'm good. I'm excited about episode 163 today. It's a continuation
Wow,
of what we
that's a
talked
lot of
about.
episodes.
Yeah, it is a lot of episodes. It really
Yeah,
is. Um,
yeah,
and we're going to continue the conversation we started in 162.
yeah,
The title of today's episode is Three Essential Elements of a Healthy, Effective Church. In 162, the title was Being Small is Not a Problem,
yeah,
a Virtue, or an excuse. And we
yeah.
unpack that together. We had the privilege of having Karl Vaters, who actually was with us on episodes 124 and 125 on our
Yeah.
podcast. And if you want to listen to Carl's voice, you can go
Yeah.
to those two pods and listen. But we brought Karl to Michigan just a few weeks ago in conjunction with the Michigan Ministry Network. And Carl's an expert in helping small churches develop
Yes.
and thrive. And the conference was very well attended. And even more importantly, it was impactful to those who attended it. And so we thought, hey, why don't we take a couple of podcasts and just unpack like a couple of the real big ideas that Carl shared, because we thought it would be good to reinforce that for those who were there and to introduce some of these concepts to leaders who
Yeah.
weren't able to attend. And so in 162, we unpack that statement that Carl made to these leaders of smaller churches, churches of 200 or less, saying small is not a problem, not a virtue, or an excuse. The goal shouldn't be size, the goal should be health
Yes.
and
Yeah.
vibrancy and being the best possible version of the church God has intended you to be. And that was really the focal point of our conversation in 162. If you didn't watch or listen to 162, you might want to do that.
Yeah.
But today, Jim, I'd like to focus on another key area that Carl unpacked for us. And it was this, the three essential elements of a healthy, effective church.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything we're going to share today will be this amazingly like, I've never heard this before moment. I'm pretty sure, well, maybe we'll surprise everybody and come up with something, but this is so basic, right?
Yeah.
But I think I need to be taught the basics on a regular basis
Yeah.
so that I know how to live them out and lead in the light of them. So that's what I'd like us to look at is these three essential elements. Jim, how do you feel about that conversation
Well,
today?
I think we all know what these things say, but do we actually understand what they mean? And do we understand what they
There you
mean in
go.
our current context? A husband would see the Great Commission differently than a pastor would see it. They would see it of a church plant versus a church that's thousands, but there is a relevant understanding in all of those dynamics. So I think it isn't just reminding me what I know; it's teaching me what I know means in my current context. If I don't know what Jesus said, I don't know what to be obedient to, and
Yeah.
I don't want to just have knowledge. I want to have a commandment. I want to have a promise. So these are commandments that come with promises,
Right.
and in our current context, they are important. Yeah,
So,
lead us
so
on,
here's the
John.
yeah, so here's the first one. The first essential element is the Great Commandment.
Yeah,
In Matthew chapter 22, and this is right in our wheelhouse, Jim, my wheelhouse especially. I mean, I teach on this, I don't know, 15, 20 times a year on
yeah,
this passage of scripture.
yeah,
And in Matthew chapter 22, Jesus was asked, Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said back to him, Love the Lord your God with all your heart and
yeah,
all your soul and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Now,
yeah,
I believe every word in the Bible is important. And
yeah,
I think sometimes we read a verse or a passage of scripture that's very familiar to us and we skip pieces of it because, oh, yeah,
yeah,
I've heard it before. I've heard that. I
yeah.
do that. And
I do too.
I believe this that the last two words in that passage, as yourself, are the missing piece
Yeah,
in the health conversation in the church today.
Yeah.
We know we're supposed to love our neighbor. Not always easy to do, but we know we're supposed to. We know we're supposed to love God wholeheartedly with
Yeah.
everything in us. A little easier to do than loving our neighbor.
Yeah.
But there is this phrase this as yourself phrase. And the word as in Greek, and I'm not here to bore anybody, but I'll just give this real quick. It's a connector word in
Yeah.
Greek, omega sigma, and it means in the same manner as. Love your neighbor in the same manner as yourself.
Yeah.
How I treat myself is a prophetic indicator of
Yeah.
how I'm going to treat people in my life.
Yeah.
The most important command in the Bible, the greatest commandment in the Bible,
Yeah.
is a three-parter. Commands us to love God, to love our neighbor, but Jesus also commands us to
Yes.
do likewise to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I believe this, for a church to be vibrant and healthy for the long haul, no matter what size it is, we have to get all three pieces of this commandment right
Yeah.
in order for us organizationally to be well. What do you think, Jim, about this first one?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how one flows directly into the other. It's funny because Jesus says the first and the greatest is this, and the second is also this. So he was asked, "What's the greatest?" Jesus, I understand, is asked hundreds of direct questions, answers two or three directly. And this is not only to answer it directly, which is extraordinarily rare, but he also answers a question that wasn't asked. So you have to say, well, why would that be? And I think it's because who would know if I love God with all my heart? I other than the love that I have in me overflows from me to my neighbor. And who would know how come I supposed to love my neighbor if it doesn't come from someone? How do we forgive if I believe God doesn't forgive me? How do I love my neighbor if I believe God doesn't love me? How do I not judge my neighbor if I believe all the time God is judging me? So this is a cascading thing,
Yes,
but it
it
does
is.
come down to you got to love you like I love you, kid. And if you love you like I love you, and you love me like I deserve to be loved, now we can talk about reaching the world. Now we can talk about forgiveness, and it won't be too burdensome. Now we can talk about generosity, and it won't feel like a tax. But until you know that I love you, until you know that you love you like I love you, loving other people is impossible. So the way I prove that I love God, believe it or not, is by the evidence that I can see, and that is loving my neighbor, loving myself. So I think you're right. I think we've gotten that. We thought it was two things, and it's not. It's three things. And that third thing is just as important in
Yeah.
the equation of our success and obedience as the first two.
And the implications of that for a church, again, I think these implications are immaterial with the size of your church, but let's just, because
Yeah.
we're talking about churches of 200 or less, this is absolutely something you can do.
Yes.
Learn, there is great material out there will teach you how to do this well. Pastor,
Yeah.
figure out how to love God with your whole heart. He called,
Yeah.
the only reason I think you're in the ministry or you started in the ministry is because Jesus did something amazing in your life.
Yeah.
Never lose that fresh sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Never lose the reason you signed up in the first place. Look,
Yeah.
ministry is a people endeavor.
Yeah.
And do the people piece well, but
Yeah.
don't exclude the third piece.
Yeah.
How do you treat yourself well? You talk to yourself well.
Yeah.
You carve time out in your week to care for your inner man, to care for not
Yeah.
just your spirit, but to care for your emotions and
Yeah.
your mind, your thought patterns, to care for your relationships. Relationships matter, friendships matter. And these are any church can do this. You said
Yeah.
in 162 that most of the commands in the Bible, or all of the commands in the Bible, can be obeyed if you have two or three people.
Yeah.
And so this is something every church can do. And and I would submit to you that if you get this right, you will be healthier.
Yes. Oh,
There will be
certainly. Yeah.
a vibrance
Yeah.
in your church that might be lacking today. Focus on this most important
Yeah.
commandment.
Yeah. Now, if you're not motivated by loving God and loving people as yourself, then what other motivation is there that will run out of steam? It will run out of steam. It will fail. Um, when the mean person that doesn't love you back, has their way with you with their words, punishing you for the sins of your predecessors, you'll quit just like your predecessors did. But if you this is the 220 outlet, man. If you're not plugged into these things, the ministry is a terrible job. I can't imagine anybody would want to be a pastor, or a youth pastor. If you didn't love God and love students, why would you ever want to be a youth pastor or a
I,
children's pastor or a senior pastor? This is the why. This is the because. And if you don't have this, then then you need to stop what you're doing and take some time to unclog these avenues in your life.
and so it's a simple set of questions, I think. Am I loving God well with all my heart,
Yeah. Yeah.
all my soul? Am I allowing the busyness of my world and my life to crowd out
Yeah.
a relationship with the Lord? Am I loving my neighbor well?
Yeah.
Is there space in my life to care for and build relationship with my neighbors? Am
Yeah.
I loving myself well? And we already talked about that. So
Yeah.
it's this self-awareness of how am I functioning in these three? And you might think, well, how does that apply to church? It applies to church in a million ways.
Yeah.
But let me just say this real quick, and we'll get on to the next one, that people tend to become who you are on the inside as a leader. Now,
Mhm.
that's not 100% foolproof.
Right.
But I would say that people pick up on whatever is happening on the inside of you,
Mhm.
and that's what they follow.
Mhm.
And that's both terrifying and
Yeah.
but it's also exciting because I have so much control over what's going on inside of me.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's the first essential element of the Great Commandment. Here's the second one, the Great Commission
Yeah.
in Matthew 28. I'm so grateful for Matthew. In
Yeah.
writing his
Yeah. For an
gospel.
IRS agent, he did really well.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
He really did. But in Matthew chapter 28, Jesus said this, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you.
Yeah.
Jim, I got a question for you. Would it
Yeah.
be too harsh? And I don't want to be harsh in any way, shape, or form here. But would it be too harsh to say that any church that is not in some way, shape, or form reaching people for Jesus and discipling them is lacking health?
Yeah.
Is that too harsh?
Yeah. No, no. I think as long as you give it the caveat that health is a process, and
Yes.
that so if we're not healthy enough, people aren't inviting anybody because they're barely holding on to the chaos that is their local congregation. Then I think the leadership needs to go back to the great commandment to work out those
There you
issues.
go.
And then from the great commandment, you can flow into the great commission. But again, it's not, well, we've been working on the great commandment for 20 years. We haven't got to the great commission. Like, wait, you're missing something. I do know that
Yeah.
long uh, set in mindsets being changed. We've had 10 pastors in 8 years. I understand there's difficulties that would delay that. But
Yes.
if one area, if loving God, people, and yourself is healthy, loving to serve, creating environments where people get to be who God created them to be, making disciples, opening doors,
Yeah.
connecting people to needs, that certainly has to come next. If you love people, that's going to happen. So I think
Right.
it's okay to admit we're not healthy enough to be an evangelistic church right now, but you
That's
you
good.
better before God have a plan to become a healthy church. You can't just
Yes.
say, well, we've never been healthy enough to do this. So we're not healthy enough now, but in the next 6 months, we're gonna courageously confront the issues, the personalities, the circumstances,
Right.
and we're gonna make discipleship and evangelism a main thrust 6 months from now. I think that's. But yes, it is a sign of being unhealthy. If what you have you don't care to give away, something's wrong.
Yeah.
If
And I
welcome.
love your perspective, Jim, that first things first, right?
Yeah.
That if we're not healthy enough to execute some version of the Great Commission,
Yeah.
um, that we need to take a pause and say, okay, are we obeying the great commandment? Are we walking in that? That's such a
Yeah.
good perspective. I really appreciate that. So the essential elements, the great commandment,
Yeah.
the great commission,
Yeah.
and then the third essential element is equipping God's people.
Yeah.
Ephesians 4:11 and 12. Jim, I know that this is totally in your wheelhouse, this third
Yeah.
one. Paul said it was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers to prepare God's people for works of service so that the
Yeah.
body of Christ might be built up. It does not matter if you pastor a church of 20 or 2,000, you are called to equip God's people. You are not called to do all the ministry by yourself while everyone watches you and
Yeah.
applauds. Um, Karl said this, and I thought it was so good. He said, if you pastor a small church, start with one person.
Hmm.
Start equipping one person. He said, find people, and I know you like this. He said, find people
I
who love to
do.
serve and start with them. And he would
Yeah.
said, he said, and you told me that you did this years ago, you said this to me.
Yeah.
He said, I'd watch if somebody picked up a piece of garbage on the sidewalk. And I thought,
I'm the one who threw the garbage on the sidewalk, by the way,
yeah,
in
in
front
your
of in front of the main
in your
doors of the church.
scenario, yeah.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about this third one, Jim, and maybe a little bit
Yeah.
about this leader servant relationship,
Yeah.
Karl unpacked.
Well, I think let's take a business scenario to help us understand the church scenario. Every business owner would like partners more than employees. A
Mm,
partner looks at everything and says, "This reflects on me. I'm a part of this. This has value to me." An employee goes, "That's not my job." So an employee walks past a piece of trash, walking into the main doors on Sunday morning, um, and says, "That's not my job to pick up trash at this church." A partner walks in and goes, "Oh my goodness, there's trash in front of the front door of the church," and for some reason, there's something in me that just can't walk past it. So I would be
mm,
the one that threw the trash on the ground when I first came here. I threw it about 10 feet from the front door. Everybody saw it. Those who stopped and picked it up, I confessed that I'd put it there and I wanted to buy them a cup of coffee this week. And they say, why? Well, because you look at this place like I look at this place. You are, it is, and I say it's a reflection, like you'd be embarrassed, but there's a value to how this place is perceived that's equal to the way I value the way this place is perceived. And I think something that Karl said was so good. And I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here because it is such a
oh,
good
go
line.
ahead. Go for it.
But he said it's much easier to teach a servant how to be a leader than it is to teach a leader how to be a servant. And I've run into that one head on. I'm a PhD. I'm a type A. I'm a D on the DISC assessment. I'm an entrepreneur. Put me to work. Well, but then when it's time to like tear down the chairs and clean up to go home, they've left.
Yeah.
But the kid that stayed to set up the chairs and pick up the trash to get the room set up for the next day, man, if you'll teach that servant how to be a leader, I promise you, they already have the necessity of washing feet. They already have that in their DNA. So
Yeah.
a servant, someone who values what's happening and values every role, how no matter how minor it may be, considers it an honor to serve. That is a great leader in the making. And let's just say that it's not. Let's say that servant really can't become a leader. You still have a great servant. But let's say
Yeah.
a leader can't become a servant. You may have a big problem. So Karl's advice, and I would echo it, is throw a piece of trash in front of the front door and see who picks it up. See who comes early, see who stays late, and see
Mm,
why they do it. See,
yeah.
we have official greeters at our church. We have people that just like people, and they stand about 10 feet inside the door, and they're the hugging crew. They can't wait to see the people. Oh, you're new here. Let me introduce you to you like the deer hunt. Bob likes the deer hunts. They have no
Yeah.
official role, but I love those people because they are in essence some of our greatest evangelists because they connect people to people, and people who are connected to people connect to Jesus much differently than people who are disconnected from people. So
Yeah.
find the servants and see if they can't be leaders. And I would make sure that your leaders can be servants before you put them in positions of leadership.
So good. So if you're listening or watching today, there's a lot that goes into pastoring a church, leading a church, and we're not trying to oversimplify it. We
Mhm.
realize there's complexity
Yeah.
to leading anything. But I'm thinking that these three are powerful pillars. If you want your organization to be healthy, man, focus on the Great Commandment, focus on the Great Commission. Understand that one of your primary roles as a leader is to see the greatness that God has put in people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
call that out of them and help them to develop it. That's the equipping piece. And you know what? I don't know if there's anything more fun in ministry than that third one
Yeah.
is seeing the God-given potential in people and saying, I
Yeah.
see something in you. Maybe you don't even see yourself.
Yeah.
And I want to bring that to the surface, and we want to help you develop that gift, that amazing talent that God has placed in you. There's a lot of joy in that.
Mhm.
And so we want to encourage you today. Always want to try to encourage you in podcasts, but challenge you at the same time. Again, we
Yeah.
hope we've accomplished both. Jim, any last thoughts as we wrap up?
I I was at the thing. I heard Karl teach before, but just recapping it has fanned some flames. I thank you for making this a priority, because I think a lot of, again, half the people in America that call themselves Christians are in a church that's under 200 in attendance, and half the people are in a church that's over 200 in attendance. And for far too long, we've made one thing seem more successful, and so one thing is more a failure. And it's wonderful to be liberated from that notion. It is not true.
Right.
And everything that Jesus has mandated in the Great Commandment, in the Great Commission, and in the fivefold ministry can be done with the three people or more. So everybody's qualified to play at this level and to enjoy it. So I would just say this: we love you guys. We are here to find out where you're itching, and produce, something that scratches that itch where you're hungry, and produce cheeseburgers. We love it. We were just at a recent event, and I had probably half a dozen people say, just really enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for doing that. They walked away, I have no idea who this person is. But we love that this is not a money making thing. Obviously, this is a free of charge conversation between friends that have enough friends out there that say, if you guys could talk about this, we'd appreciate it. And that really is where most of this comes from, is listening. So if we're missing something, tell us. If you need a podcast that hasn't happened yet, let us know. It is not at all uncommon that the topic that we are completely unaware of, you bring to our attention, and then we think about it for a season, pray about it, talk to people about it, and come back with that request. So let us know how we can help you. Convergecoach.com. Send us a quick, maybe in the comments of this podcast, if you guys could do this, or what about that, or hey, I need some help. How would I get a hold? Just convergecoach.com. There's a click. What do you call that? The
Contact
link?
us.
Contact us. Yeah. Half hour. We'll take a half hour. If you only need 10 minutes, we'll give you 10 minutes, but up to a half hour of just hanging out, talking about what's on your heart and how we can help you and move you forward, because we love you. We believe in you. So go get them, guys. It's Tuesday. You're still a leader. You're still in the ministry. You've made it another week. Well done. Good and faithful servant. Keep serving. God bless you as you continue to lead from alignment.